He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon.
Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome to The Briefing. I'm Arlene Foster and here's what's coming up over the next hour. Another day, another strike. RMT and ASLEF members are taking industrial action over conditions and pay. We will cross live to our reporters to find out how much disruption this is causing. Outrage at British Gas and other energy firms as a Times investigation found that debt agents were breaking into the homes of vulnerable people to install by force prepayment meters. I'll be joined by Conservative MP and member of the Business Committee, Ruth Edwards. And will the West send jet fighters to Ukraine? Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson has used his tour around the US to call for the West to step up their military support to Ukraine. So give me your political briefing as well, please. Send in your views and opinions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. First of all, here's the news with Rihanna.
Arlene, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 2, your top stories from the GB newsroom. The partner of a missing woman says he's focusing on staying strong for their 2 daughters. There are growing concerns for the welfare of Nicola Bulley, who went missing a week ago in Lancashire. The 45-year-old was last seen walking her dog just before 9 a.m. last Friday in St Michael's-on-Wyre. Her phone and dog were found by the river half an hour later. Nicola's partner, Paul Ansell, says he hopes people will come forward with new information.
Every single scenario comes to a brick wall, every single one of them. And then all we're doing is sitting there going round and round and round, going through every scenario, and then go back to the first scenario again and do the whole thing again. And it's just all day long. That's all we're doing. That's all we're doing.
Friend Emma White says it's been particularly difficult explaining the situation to Nicola's children.
Again, little minds asking questions where Mummy is. The only, again, hope we have is we know Mummy's missing, and they see Mummy's picture everywhere, and they know everybody's out looking and doing everything we can.
The community's coming together to help find the missing mortgage advisor. They're appealing for anyone with information to come forward, hoping images of Nicola will help jog their memory.
All week there have been searches going on with the local community. Everybody's really kind of come together to try and do everything they can to find her and bring her home to her family. It's just, you know, we're keeping eyes out for dash cams, anyone that could possibly have been here this time last week.
I just feel like I've got to stand here and do my bit, even if it's just stood here holding a sign up.
A man armed with a crossbow has admitted trying to harm Queen Elizabeth in 2021. Jasvant Singh Chahal was arrested on the grounds of Windsor Castle on Christmas Day, carrying a weapon which was loaded with bolts, with the safety catch released and ready to fire. The 21-year-old pleaded guilty to 3 charges, including an offence under the Treason Act. The late Queen was in residence at the time. Disgraced pop star Gary Glitter has been freed from jail after serving half of his 16-year sentence for sex offences. The 79-year-old, who had a string of hits in the 1970s, was jailed in 2015 for sexually abusing 3 schoolgirls. The sex offender, who left a low-security prison in Dorset earlier, will now be subject to licence conditions. British Gas is under pressure to compensate its vulnerable customers. It follows a Times investigation which found debt collectors broke into homes to forcibly install prepayment meters. Regulator Ofgem has ordered all domestic energy companies to suspend the practice and says it's opening its biggest ever market review into the meters. Ambulance workers in Wales have suspended Monday's strike. That's after the Welsh Government made a new pay offer. Meanwhile, rail passengers are facing more travel disruption today, with train drivers walking out for the second time this week. Rail operators say there are severe delays, no trains at all in some areas. ASLEF General Secretary Mick Whelan says the union wants talks to continue to try and find a solution.
Quite deceitfully, the RDG put out a protocol which they led for a pay offer over 2 years that hadn't been discussed with this trade union, hadn't been through the framework agreement that we'd agreed with them to allow some sort of national talks to take place in our fractionalised industry, and it's probably set the whole process back months and months. If they want to negotiate via the media, I'll tell you what I want, and then you can relay it to them. They can come and talk to us in a few weeks' time. But we don't behave like that. We behave honourably. So we'll go back into talks on Tuesday in the hope that trust can be rebuilt and we can find a way forward.
Anti-Brexit campaigner Gina Miller has become the latest person to accuse the Deputy Prime Minister of bullying. She says Dominic Raab launched an abusive attack and was aggressive and intimidating during an encounter in 2016. A source close to the Justice Secretary described the claims as malicious and baseless, saying they were timed to jump on a political bandwagon. Shadow Immigration Minister Stephen Kinnock says it's time for Mr Raab to go.
I think it's pretty clear now that everybody that works around him is going to have some serious doubts about whether or not they should be coming into work today. There seems to be a pattern of behaviour from Mr Raab, and it's not fair on his colleagues that they are having to work with somebody who is potentially a bully and a tyrant and somebody who disrespects the colleagues that he works with. So he should be suspended.
And a suspected Chinese spy balloon is being tracked by the US military. It's been spotted flying over America for a couple of days. Fighter jets were mobilised, but a decision was made not to shoot it down because the debris could pose a safety risk. It comes ahead of a trip to Beijing by the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken. China says it hopes both sides can handle the matter calmly. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to Arlene with the briefing.
Welcome to the show. Well, the disgraced paedophile pop star Gary Glitter has been released from prison after serving only half of his 16-year sentence. Glitter, whose real name is Paul Gadd, was jailed in 2015 for sexually abusing 3 schoolgirls. He had previously been jailed in 1999 for possessing thousands of child porn images and again in 2006 for sexually abusing girls in Vietnam. Our reporter Ray Addison is at Verne Prison in the Isle of Portland in Dorset. Ray, bring us up to date.
Yeah, good afternoon, Arlene. As you were saying, Gary Glitter, the disgraced pop star, was released earlier on today from HMP The Verne. As you can see, the entrance to the prison behind me. It's a low security Category C prison. Now, he served 8 years of a 16-year sentence. He was released automatically halfway through that term. Of course, Glitter, whose real name is Paul Gadd, was jailed in 2015 for sexually abusing 3 schoolgirls. Now, 2 of the girls were aged 12 and 13. The offences against them took place in the 1970s when he was at the height of his fame. He managed to separate them and isolate them from their mothers and took them to his dressing room. His third victim was aged under 10, and he attempted to rape her in 1975. Now, these offences came to light as part of Operation U-Tree, carried out by the Met Police as a result of the Jimmy Savile inquiry. He's the first person to be arrested as part of that investigation. Of course, Glitter, as you were saying, Arlene, has a history of sexual offences against children. It dates back to 1999 when he was jailed for 4 months after 4,000 indecent images, child pornography, were found on his when he was found to possess those images. In 2002, he was expelled from Cambodia amid reports of sex crime allegations, and in 2006 he was convicted of sexually abusing 2 girls in Vietnam, and he ended up serving around 2.5 years for those offences. Now, I've been speaking to people here, people coming up. We're actually on a hill. The prison is based on a very high hill above Portland here in Dorset, above a bay, and visitors were coming up to look at the boats below, and they were telling me that there's no way he should have been released today. He should have served the full 16 years of his sentence, and they also had concerns that he'd been serving the last few years of his sentence in a Category C prison, and they believe he should have been in a much more severe regime. Of course, he will now be on license. He'll have restrictions upon his movement. He will have to tell his probation officer where he's going to be living, and if he wishes to leave the country, he'll have to give 7 days' notice as well.
Ray, thank you very much for bringing us up to date on that news that came out today. Ray Addison there from Dorset. Well, train passengers are facing another day of travel chaos today as drivers strike for a second time this week. Most services across England will be cancelled. Members of ASLEF and the RMT unions are walking out over an unsettled dispute concerning pay, job security and indeed working practices. Operators say strike action may also affect services on Saturday. So is there any end in sight to this chaos? We are crossing now live to our reporters Paul Hawkins and in Euston and Jack Carson, who's in Birmingham. Paul, first of all, tell us what the atmosphere is like at Euston today.
Well, the picket line has gone. It was here earlier today. Mick Whelan, the boss of the RMT, in a defiant mood, really. ASLEF, which are the that cover almost all the train drivers. They're the ones that are striking today. There's a couple of hundred train drivers from the RMT as well, but ASLEF are the main instigators of today's industrial action. Really unhappy with the government's current deal, or I should say the rail delivery group's current deal that is on the table. 4% backdated pay rise for last year, 4% this year, but terms and conditions attached, which Mick Whelan said was unacceptable. And when I spoke to him earlier, he said that he thinks it's highly likely that there will be further strike dates announced, and that the trust is at an all-time low when it comes to negotiating with the rail delivery group, and those negotiations will continue next week. Meanwhile, the RMT, we know that they will respond to the deal that is currently on the table from Network Rail and the rail delivery group next week. They've put that out for consultation with their members. But when I spoke to Mick Lynch on Sunday, he said that certainly they're not standing up to applaud the current deal that's on the table, but they are considering it. And so next week there could be a breakthrough, a settlement agreed between the RMT, which is 3 times bigger in terms of members than ASLEF, and the rail delivery group and Network Rail. ASLEF, though, remain adamant, though, that the industrial action, it sounds like it will continue at the moment. Today is the 8th day of action compared to well over 25 days from the RMT. So one would have thought that certainly ASLEF's members, when you consider that they're on an average wage of 60 grand a year, rising to 65 if they were to accept this deal, they can afford to take further industrial action as we head towards spring.
Indeed, Paul, and I mean, you were talking there about Mick Whelan, and he has been saying today that rail strikes could last for years. I mean, this is not the sort of thing that commuters will want to hear from the union chief today.
Yeah, he was asked repeatedly about that earlier, and he said, look, I did say that it could last years. I don't want it to, nor do I think it will, but I'm adamant that we haven't had a pay rise for years, and that's why I'm holding my ground. And it doesn't really matter that his union is smaller than the RMT's, because his union involves almost all the train drivers, and without them you can't get any trains around on the network. Interestingly, in terms of public opinion, YouGov poll a couple of days ago, and it is just one poll, but it suggested that there is between 40 and 52% public support for the rail strikes, considerably lower when you compare that to around about 60-65% in terms of public opinion for NHS strikes.
Yeah, interesting. We'll move up now to Birmingham, to Jack. Jack, bring us up to date with things that are happening up in Birmingham.
Well, just like down there in Euston for a lot of the country, there have been absolutely no services here from Birmingham New Street at all, and so many passengers and commuters have had to find alternative arrangements of transport. There's quite a few picket lines, usually around New Street, for the different train operating companies, and of course Network Rail. There was quite good attendance from the ASLEF union members on the picket line representing Avanti West Coast. I've also been kind of around Birmingham. There's 3 stations in Birmingham city centre. I was speaking to members on the picket line at Birmingham Moor Street, where Chiltern run the main line there, and I was kind of asking them, because we hear this term of working conditions kind of bandied around a lot, and obviously pay and working conditions, which is one of the things that of course the unions are in dispute with, like the Rail Delivery Group and the government over, and they were saying that how complicated actually it is for the working conditions, because with each train operating company there are different working conditions, different practices that the unions want ironed out for each kind of specific for very specific members, and so that's what makes these negotiations so tricky, and that it's not just all about pay. But we know the condition that Network Rail specifically are in, and the rail industry are in. Of course, they're under pressure to save money after the impact of the pandemic. Network Rail saying that they're planning to cut 1,900 jobs as part of their change to the way that maintenance teams work, but the RMT disagreeing with some of those changes and wanting a guarantee that there's going to be no compulsory job losses. And when actually you also look some of the pay offers that have been rebuffed as well. We know, of course, Network Rail was saying that backdated pay rise of 5% with a 4% increase this year was their final offer. But where the wiggle room is, where we might start to see a breakthrough, as Paul was saying there, is because, of course, that red line of driver-only trains and there being no onboard guards on trains, that was one of the things that was the removal of those guards was put into the last deal. But at the last round of negotiations, we know that last month that condition of axing those onboard guards was removed as part of that revised deal that the RMT executive are now considering. So we might well have a breakthrough soon.
But I suppose, Jack, the difficulty is we could have a breakthrough with one of the unions and the other union decides not to play ball. I mean, there's no necessity for ASLEF and RMT to both agree to a package. One may decide to do otherwise, and that leaves us in the same situation that we're in. I noticed that the Train Delivery Group chairman, Steve Montgomery, said that he felt the negotiations were going backwards with ASLEF. Really, is there any sign, Paul, of this moving to a resolution? It's been going on now for so long.
No, to be honest, speaking to Mick Whelan, there isn't. Speaking to the other Mick Lynch, there seems like there is some room for a compromise there, and that's why if you're looking at which union is more likely to strike a deal, you think, OK, maybe the RMT will come back with something positive next week. But speaking to Mick Whelan, make no bones about it, he is really angry with the government and with the Rail Delivery Group. Trust has reached an all-time low. He doesn't like the way that these negotiations have been conducted, and his members have been on strike for 8 days, so they can afford to strike for that much bit longer. So it doesn't seem like, certainly unless something fundamentally shifts, unless that deal is altered, and certainly some of those terms and conditions that Jack was alluding to are pared back, then there is going to be anywhere near a settlement. And in the meantime, of course, the rail industry is losing hundreds of millions of pounds by the day. Its reputation is in tatters. And the wider economy, and we know hospitality has lost billions already, of course. When you're trying to grow the economy, and we hear the government talking about growth, very difficult when you can't run a reliable network.
Absolutely. Well, thanks to you both for joining me this afternoon. That's Paul Hawkins and Jack Carson joining me from the picket lines, which seem to have gone by now, but in any event, they're still there reporting for us. After the break, we'll be talking to a member of the Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Select Committee about prepayment meters, and we'll also be considering whether Britain should send jets to Ukraine later on in the programme. But before all of that, let's take a look at the weather.
Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update. The weekend is almost upon us and many of us will have a dry one. There will be some rain on Saturday and it'll be a cloudy and mild day, whereas Sunday turns a bit colder but much, much sunnier. Back to the rest of today. High pressure in control across the south. This weather front, though, has been chugging its way across northern Britain, still providing a little bit of rain here and there across the Pennines in particular and through the Northern Isles during this evening. But for most, it's dry, some drizzle at times in western areas, but I say most places not seeing any rain overnight. We'll keep a lot of cloud and that will keep things mild. Temperatures in the east may drop down to 4 or 5 Celsius, but for most of us, we start the weekend at 7 or 8 degrees. So a mild start to Saturday, fairly drab starts, but most places dry across England and Wales. Here's some rain coming in, though, initially to the northwest of Scotland, and then it will spread its way southwards towards Glasgow and Belfast by lunchtime, and then drifting towards Edinburgh across southern Scotland later on. The far northwest may turn a bit brighter later. For most of England and Wales, it will be dry, cloudy. Some breaks in the cloud, a bit of brightness coming through. It will be mild, double digits almost across the board. Some of that rain will push into northern England and North Wales on Saturday evening, but it's fizzling out all the while as it works its way further south, and that band of rain out of the way by Sunday. It is introducing colder air and clearer conditions as well. So the blue hue on the chart, it is going to turn frosty for much of northern Britain as we head into Sunday. So a very different day on Sunday. It will be a bit colder first thing with a frost, but a sparkling day of winter sunshine by and large. A bit of a breeze perhaps for Norfolk and at times across the Western Isles, but for most, light winds, plenty of sunshine. Temperatures won't be as high because we've got colder air coming in, but these numbers are about average for the time of year, and with light winds in the sunshine, it'll feel fairly pleasant. Enjoy your weekend.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instinct was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you.
GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back to the show. Well, energy companies have been asked by the industry regulator Ofgem to suspend the forced installation of prepayment meters. Yesterday, an investigation by the Times newspaper revealed that British Gas were using debt collectors to break into the homes of vulnerable people to install pay-as-you-go meters.
Hello, it's British Gas, your gas supply. We're here with a court warrant. Can you please open the door? Otherwise there are lots of them open it for you. The exciting bit. I love this bit.
Which bit?
This bit. I love this bit.
The same agent offered me tips on judging a customer's vulnerability.
But if they're just saying, "Oh, I'm a single mum and I got 3 kids," and that's not vulnerability. Right. It is a vulnerability, but I'm a bit old school and a bit hard nosed.
I was in teams sent to enforce warrants for British Gas at homes where customers included a 77-year-old man as well as a young mother aged 25 who had 4 children.
Shocking stuff. And upon the revelations, Grant Shapps, the Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, tweeted he was horrified by the findings of the investigation. Ofgem have now told energy companies to suspend the installation of these meters. Well, joining me now is Conservative MP Ruth Edwards, who's a member of the Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Select Committee. Ruth, thank you so much for joining me. Ruth, you mentioned this behaviour on the 23rd of January in the House of Commons when you said, "I'm incredibly concerned to hear reports of a number of vulnerable customers being moved on to prepayment meters," and you went on to ask what steps the government were going to take to ensure fair play. So you had an inkling that this was going on before the Times investigation.
Well, we'd seen a huge rise in the number of applications for these warrants because companies have to get a court warrant to move somebody onto a prepayment meter. And citizens groups like the Citizens Advice Bureau, who you will have seen gave evidence to the Select Committee on Tuesday, made it very clear that they are seeing a large number, a huge increase, in fact, of customers who are being moved on to these prepayment meters, many who are vulnerable. And you'll have seen the Times investigation, but also work from Citizens Advice has highlighted customers with mental health difficulties, customers who have physical disabilities, older customers, customers with very young children, all of whom, to any sensible person, should be viewed as people with vulnerabilities who shouldn't be forced onto these prepayment meters. So yeah, we did have an inkling that was happening. That's why a lot of the questioning on Tuesday in the committee session was focused on that and around the treatment of those customers, and why we put a lot of questions to Ofgem as well as to what they were going to do. So I'm really pleased that Ofgem have obviously given this legal order to British Gas to prevent them from enforcing any more of these prepayment meters for the time being, and that they're also doing a proper review into the market, because although we need a temporary moratorium like we have at the moment, we also need long-term change.
Yeah. And Ruth, I mean, were you, like myself, quite shocked at that footage? I don't know whether you were able to hear it, but I'm sure you've seen it before, where these guys were taking great pleasure, actually, in going into vulnerable people's homes and putting these prepayment meters in and dismissing if they said, "Hold on, I'm a single mum, I've got 3 children," and just, well, so what? It's surely, I mean, this should not be happening in the UK in 2023.
Oh, I completely agree with you, Arlene. It shouldn't be happening anywhere. And I think that video was really sickening. And the really sickening thing about it was the fact that they actually seemed to be...
Oh, dear. We've lost Ruth, unfortunately. I'm sorry about that, because I really wanted to talk to her about what should the next stage be for those people who have had these prepayment meters actually enforced upon them. Should there be compensation granted to those people? Because it is so unacceptable for these people to break into homes, essentially, and to put these prepayment meters in. So This is just so wrong, and no doubt we will be returning to this story in due course. But coming up after the break, we're going to be discussing whether Britain should send jets to Ukraine with a former RAF officer and a senior defence analyst as well. Also, we're waiting for the press conference from Lancashire Police to give us an update on the disappearance, the dreadfully sad disappearance of Nicola Bulley. Our reporter Theo Chikomba is at the press conference. But first, we're going to have Rhiannon with your news headlines. Oh, so we're not just going over there yet. We're also going to take a little package now, because Labour MP Alex Davis-Jones got rape and death threats after speaking out about toxic masculinity and the negative influence people such as Andrew Tate have on schoolboys. The Shadow Minister for Digital Culture, Media and Sport spoke to Gloria Di Piero about the difficulties.
Sadly, this isn't the first time this has happened, and it's quite sad and pathetic. But sadly, an all-too reality of being a woman or anyone who speaks out on these issues. And it's only heightened my desire to speak out even more. They think they're trying to silence me and scare me away, but actually all it makes me does is want to speak out even more.
And that's a really impactful interview, which you can watch in full on GB News' show Gloria Meets, where you'll find out who the person behind the politician is, and that's on this Sunday at 6 p.m. Well, I'm delighted to say that Ruth has been able to rejoin me. Thanks, Ruth, for coming back online. Ruth, I was really going to ask you finally, what do you think the next stage should be in this process? Should these people be able to get compensation for what has happened to them, given that there was forced entry into their homes? Ruth, can you hear me?
Very, very slowly. Sorry, the sound is quite distorted.
Oh,
I got forced entry into their home.
Yes, I was asking, should there be compensation paid to these people who have had these prepayment meters installed against their will? No, I'm afraid we don't seem to be able to connect again with Ruth, so we're just going to move on now and listen to Rhiannon with your news headlines. Rhiannon.
Arlene, thank you. It's just coming up to 2:30, your top stories from the GB newsroom. Lancashire Police are due to hold a news conference shortly on the search for missing mother of two, Nicola Bulley. She disappeared a week ago and was last seen walking her dog just before 9 a.m. last Friday in St Michael's on Wyre. Her phone and dog were found by the river half an hour later. Nicola's partner, Paul Ansell, says he hopes people will come forward with new information.
Every single scenario comes to a brick wall, every single one of them. And then all we're doing is sitting there going round and round and round, going through every scenario, and then go back to the first scenario again and do the whole thing again, and it's just all day long. That's all we're doing. That's all we're doing.
A man who was carrying a crossbow on the grounds of Windsor Castle on Christmas Day in 2021 has admitted trying to harm Queen Elizabeth. 21-year-old Jasvant Singh Chahal pleaded guilty to 3 charges, including an offence under the Treason Act. His crossbow was loaded with bolts, with the safety catch released and ready to fire. The late Queen was in residence at the time. Disgraced pop star Gary Glitter has been freed from jail after serving half of his 16-year sentence for sex offences. The 79-year-old, who had a string of hits in the 1970s, was jailed in 2015 for sexually abusing 3 schoolgirls. The sex offender, who left a low-security prison in Dorset, will now be subject to licence conditions. And ambulance workers in Wales have suspended Monday's strike after the Welsh Government made a new pay offer. Meanwhile, rail services are disrupted today, with train drivers walking out for the second time this week. RMT and ASLEF union members are demanding better pay and conditions. Rail operators say there are severe delays with no trains at all in some areas. TV online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Arlene will be back with the briefing in just a moment.
He's the king of breakfast TV and he's back.
Eamon Holmes, back on the TV
Surprised
with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like.
Absolutely.
On Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the show. Well, last week, Ukraine managed to secure Western tanks, and inevitably the conversation has now turned to the next capability that can bolster Ukrainian defences. With a new spring offensive from Russia looking likely, Ukraine is requesting the provision of jets and missiles from Western nations. Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been calling to give the Ukrainians the equipment they need during his tour of the United States. Meanwhile, UK Defence Secretary Ben Wallace and France's Emmanuel Macron have said that they won't rule anything out. In contrast, Germany's Chancellor has warned against escalation. Well, I'm delighted to say that joining me in the studio, which is always good, is defence academic and former RAF officer Dr. Andrew Curtis. Andrew, I suppose when tanks arrived and there was a little bit of delay with some of the countries in relation to the tanks, that the next stage was always going to be air capability, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it's fairly obvious that the Ukrainians are going to ask for everything that they need, yes. And there's going to be an element of ramping up. You know, clearly tanks were very important, and it took a long time to get that Western support. I think definitely air power is next on the list.
And is there a danger in publicly commenting on what's next and how much can we give to them without retaliation and all of that? Because, of course, Putin's watching very carefully what each of the nations are saying.
I'm not sure that's necessarily an issue. I mean, I think there's an awful lot of discussion and activity goes on behind closed doors. And so the fact that there's an element of this that's sort of open dialogue, I don't think there's a problem with that.
Yeah. Yeah, and some of the commentary I've been reading has been talking about the concerns of just handing over air capability and then expecting the pilots in Ukraine to be able to deal with those aeroplanes. I mean, should we be concerned about that?
Yeah, I think probably the first question to ask is what is it that the Ukrainians want to do with this air power? Because depending on that will depend on then, you know, what's actually relevant in terms of capability that they could use. But you're quite right in recognising that offering and giving air power is a definite step up in terms of capability usage, and the training and the development of both aircrew and, in fact, ground crew is quite significant. It's a lot more different than maintaining and operating armour and main battle tanks.
And I was noticing that some people were talking about F-16, some people were talking about F-35s. What's the difference between the two?
So the F-16 is what's known as a fourth-generation aircraft, so developed during the 1970s and 80s, and has been the backbone of most Western forces from the end of the sort of Cold War onwards, whereas the F-35 is a much newer aircraft, fifth-generation aircraft in terms of the terminology, more stealth capability, and a lot more classified material used in its development, and so in terms of making that aircraft available, I think much less likely.
Yes, yes, indeed. And, you know, we're coming to the anniversary now of 1 year since the invasion of Ukraine. I know it doesn't always come on our screens, and some people may not be thinking about it as much as they did at the start. But we are in a situation where people are fearful of this next phase of what's going to happen in Ukraine. We're in the third phase, I think people are talking about now, a new offensive. What should we be thinking about when we hear what's going on in Ukraine at the moment?
I think the first thing I think about actually is the effect on the Ukrainian people themselves.
Oh, sure, yeah.
You know, it's very easy to forget that there are innocent people caught up in this, and that's always going to be the case. And so it's very easy to gloss over that and to just look at sort of objectively about you know, military manoeuvring and you know, taking ground and holding ground. But at the end of the day, that's ground that people actually live on.
Yeah, and people are talking about it being a much more intense phase, but my goodness, last year was quite difficult to watch what was going on to the, as you rightly say, the ordinary people of Ukraine going about their ordinary day lives.
Yeah, I think you very quickly forget some of those scenes in Mariupol and the steelworks. It's been a very intense and bloody campaign to date, and unfortunately there is every indication that that is going to continue. Whatever the next phase is, I'm afraid it's likely to be just as difficult as what we've seen over the last 12 months.
And I mean, last year we were having Ukrainians coming to the UK, and we were talking a lot about that and the fact that people were having to leave their homelands. It does seem to have gone off the agenda of many mainstream commentators, doesn't it? And I suppose it's a year now.
Yeah, and I think, unfortunately, that is the natural way that happens for these things. They do almost sort of, you know, jump onto the screen and everybody is interested, and then over time you almost start, unfortunately, to take it for granted, which, of course, is easy to do when you're hundreds of miles away.
Yes, absolutely. And I suppose, finally, we've talked about air capability and fighter jets, but he's also talking about missiles, long-range missiles. Why would he need to have those as well in his armoury? Zelensky, this is I'm talking about.
So the aircraft itself, what he's looking for is a package that can deliver air power. And so an aircraft on its own clearly isn't going to give him much. He needs the ability to actually deploy weapons off the aircraft. So. And
surface-to-air missiles as well, no?
So I think in terms of air defence, there's definitely been a lot of air defence being offered and given, and I think most of the Western nations have provided elements of air defence. And so I think what he's looking at now is being able to use air power in the best way possible. And as you would expect, he is going to ask for the most cutting-edge, you know, weapons technology that he can get, because at the end of the day, for the Ukrainians, this is a war of national survival, and he is going to deploy everything he possibly can to win that.
Well, Andrew, thank you so much for coming into the studio and explaining to me the difference between an F-16 and an F-35. Thank you for all of that and for coming in today. Well, we'll be hearing about that. We're going to have a little package now because Today marks 1 week since mother of two, Nicola Bully, went missing while walking her dog along the River Wire in Lancashire. Paul Ansell, Nicola's partner, has been saying he will never lose hope. And here's what he had to say.
My whole focus is my two girls, just staying as strong as I can for them. I'm scared that if I put any focus into anything else, it's going to take my, focus off that. So I've got to be very careful. Just hoping to goodness that anything comes out from the interview yesterday, no matter how tiny. Just say a massive thank you to the community, friends, for everything that they're doing. It's absolutely incredible. I just can't believe that we're a week on, and as yet it seems like we're no further on. It just seems absolutely impossible. Just like a dream. I just cannot get my head around any of it.
I mean, you're left sort of trying to make sense of the census, aren't you? It is just such a mystery.
Yeah, it is. There's just no every single scenario comes to a brick wall, every single one of them, and then all we're doing is sitting there going round and round and round, going through every scenario, and then go back to the first scenario again and do the whole thing again, and it's just all day long. That's all we're doing. That's all we're doing.
And we'll be hearing more about this awful story because we understand that a press conference from the police is coming out pretty shortly, and we hope to bring that to you live. But now we're going to bring you the latest results of the GB News People poll, where tackling sleaze is the big issue. 1% of voters are completely confident in Rishi Sunak to tackle sleaze in British politics. That's right, 1%, while 55% are not confident at all that he will. While on the issue of the teachers' strike, 48% say they support the strikes and 28% oppose them. But it's important to say that 24% don't know or preferred not to answer. All this makes pretty grim reading for the Conservatives, who now find themselves 24 points behind the Labour Party in the national polls. Our political reporter Catherine Foster is here with me. Catherine, what stood out in our latest polls for you?
Well, a continuation of bad news for Rishi Sunak, really. There's been no honeymoon period, no poll bounce for him, really, at all. And it's a difficult message to sell that he's trying to sell, isn't it? That, the times are really hard, that they can't afford to give people wage rises that would keep up with the cost of living.
I'm sorry,
that
Catherine,
this is the right approach.
We're going to have to interrupt you there because I think this press conference is now starting in Lancashire. Police are giving an update on the missing mum, Nicola Bully.
Area went missing. Her family, particularly her partner, her children, her parents and her sister, are in real agony while she remains missing. And I want to pay particular tribute for their patience and dignity and strength at this time. In the last 7 days since Nicola went missing, a week ago today, the police have done a number of enquiries to try and find Nicola and to bring her home to her family. In particular, the search has focused on the riverbank and the River Wire here in St Michael's. An unprecedented number of search resources have been searching the river and the bank. This includes drone, the helicopter, police divers, sonar equipment, pole cameras, underwater drone, and staff wading the shallower parts of the river. We've also had search dogs that are specially trained in the area from both the boat and the riverbank. And this has included the area where Nicola went missing, but also upstream of where she went missing and the 15 kilometres or so down to the sea. We've been assisted in this by the Coast Guard, by RNLI, by colleagues from other forces, and the Lancaster Area Search and Rescue, and I want to thank them for their assistance. Unfortunately, we have not still found Nicola. but our search does continue. As well as the river search, we've also undertaken a 1 kilometre physical search of the open ground in a radius from the point where she last went missing. This has included open ground, empty buildings and their gardens, to no avail so far. As well as search officers, we've had a number of uniformed staff in the area, officers and PCSOs receiving community intelligence and offering that visible presence to the local community to answer any questions and to allay any concerns. At the same time, a dedicated team of investigators who often assist missing people inquiries has been working on this tirelessly. They have undertaken extensive house-to-house inquiries. They've checked numerous CCTV, dash cam and ring doorbell footage. They've traced and now spoken to a number of key witnesses. They have spoken to people in the community who have information about Nicola's lifestyle, her daily walks and so on. All this has built up a really rich picture of data that's allowed us to have a very tight timeline, some details of which we've already released, about Nicola's last whereabouts and what she was doing last Friday morning. I'm just going to take you through some of those. So, at 8:43 last Friday, Nicola was seen on the river path walking towards the Iron Bridge. A few minutes later, at 8:47, she was seen in the lower field with her dog, Willow, and her mobile phone, which was on view. At 8:53, she sent an email to her boss on her phone, and at 9:01, she joined a Teams work call. All of this was normal behaviour for Nicola. This was not out of the ordinary, and nothing different or unusual happened during those calls and emails. At 9:10, she was seen in the upper field. The dog was off the lead. Again, this was normal. The dog was not in its harness and the lead wasn't on the dog, which was all part of Nicola's daily routine. At 9:20, through inquiries we've made, we believe that her phone was on the bench. At 9:30, the Teams meeting ended, but Nicola's phone remained dialed in. At 9:33, a witness found Nicola's dog Willow running between the gate to the field and the bench where the phone was located. Also found by that witness was the dog harness, which was on the grass between the bench and the river's edge. Therefore, the time that we are particularly interested in is between 9:10, the last confirmed sighting, and at 9:20, when Nicola's phone was found on the bench. Sorry, not found on the bench, when Nicola's phone was on the bench, believed to be on the bench, found at around 9:33. The witness made numerous inquiries to try and find the owner of the phone, not knowing whose phone it was, and indeed whose dog it was. That led the witness to meet up with other people who did recognise the dog as Nicola's, and the school to which Nicola's children go was alerted at 10:50, as was her family. This means that we've only a 10-minute window in which we cannot account for Nicola's movements. The inquiry team has undertaken a number, as I said, of dashcam, CCTV and ring doorbell footages. This has allowed us to eliminate any trace so far of Nicola having left the riverside, which is really important. So we believe that Nicola was in the riverside area and remained in the riverside area. We remain open to any inquiries that might lead us to question that, but at this time, we understand that she was by the river. Our main working hypothesis, therefore, is that Nicola has sadly fallen into the river, that there is no third party or criminal involvement, and that this is not suspicious, but a tragic case of a missing person. This is particularly important because speculation otherwise can be really distressing for the family and for Nicola's children. In terms of what we would like from the public, I would like to thank them, particularly Nicola's friends, neighbours and the community of St Michael's and the wider area, who've come out in force to help in the search for Nicola. I do have an update on the clothing that Nicola was last seen wearing, and this is something that the public who live in the area or who walk their dogs on the river path near to St Michael's or downstream of St Michael's towards Morecambe Bay can look out for. They are an ankle-length black quilted gilet jacket, a black Engelbert Strauss waist-length coat, which was worn underneath the gilet, tight-fitting black jeans, long green walking socks tucked into her jeans, ankle-length green necked wellies, and a necklace and a pale blue Fitbit. It's really important that the public pay heed to those very specific clothing descriptions, please, because factual sightings of those items would be very useful to us. We also appeal for any remaining dashcam footage that may not yet have been submitted to the police in this inquiry, particularly if people have that relating to the Garstang Lane area of St Michael's. Please can the public continue to report only factual information that they have and not speculation as to what may have happened to Nicola, because this is a distraction to the police inquiry and not helpful for the family. I would also appeal to the public to keep themselves safe in this inquiry. People going out at night in the darkness could fall into the river and face other hazards. Likewise, if they go out in boats on the river, please only do so if you've got experience in doing that. We don't want people to be in danger. Lastly, I'd like to underline the support given to the family. It is, as I've said, an agonising time for them. Nicola has 2 little girls, a partner, sister and parents, as well as many, many friends and neighbours and well-wishers in the local community. We are supporting her family with specially trained officers and staff, and I'd like to thank the wider community for all the support that they've given during this very difficult inquiry. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions if there are any.
Can I ask, is there any data from the Fitbit, the newer Fitbits, you can track the location using the phone?
Yeah, all the telephony and digital inquiries have been handled by the inquiry team, so all of that data will be looked at. Thank you. Hi.
Hi, Hannah from the Sunday Times. I know earlier in the week you were searching the river for signs that she'd fallen in. Did you find anything? Is there anything to support that hypothesis?
No, not so far. Unfortunately not. That's why I particularly appeal around any clothing that may be matching the description I've given and that could be found, but nothing has been found in the river. I should say that the river is tidal below the weir, so if you see repeated searches of particular areas of the river, it's not necessarily because we found something of note, it's because the river movement is complex and we are taking advice from academic specialists in water movement around currents and so on.
Just one other thing, has she made any contributions on the Teams call? Had she spoken or was it just on the news?
Not that I understand, no. And again, this was normal. It was a large Teams call. She was one of many people on the call and I wouldn't have expected to necessarily to participate actively. Thank you.
How do you know the phone was on the bench at 9:20 exactly?
Through telephony inquiries that we've done relative to the phone itself rather than through a witness.
Okay, so it wasn't seen on the public there?
No.
Hi.
Hi.
Today, obviously, lots of friends and family have been out in forums. Has any new information come from any of that people holding up pictures of people?
Not that I'm aware of today. Clearly, the public are very well intentioned and have given us a lot of information, quite rightly. They don't know whether it is of particular use or not, and obviously we can judge that, can't we? But so far, it's taken a lot of effort and diligence to go through all the information that's been provided, and we'll continue to do that right through the weekend and into next week. Hello.
Earlier today, one of Nicola's friends said that she was holding a new torture coat because of the amount of calls that police have had. Can you tell us a bit about how many calls or pieces of information you had from members of the public, and got any idea about the number?
I can't give you a number, but I know there have been a lot of calls today. Clearly, 7 days on is a really good time for people to think back, particularly if they have perhaps a particular work pattern where maybe they might be working on a Friday or not working on a Friday. It's again Friday today, and that will probably take them back to what they were doing last Friday. Were they driving through St Michael's at around 9:15? Were they dropping children off? Were they going off to work? What were they doing last Friday that they might always do? That would be helpful for us to know if it's relevant to the inquiry. Hello.
Can you just explain to me why you're so sure she didn't leave the riverside? Are there no kind of cross-country routes, no other ways out at all that could have been taken?
Yes, several of the exits from the riverside area are either locked or they're covered by CCTV. So we've been able to look at that CCTV, negate Nicola leaving the local area. The areas that are not covered by CCTV is where we've been particularly interested in dashcam footage. So that's Garstang Lane leading to the A586. If we can definitively cover off that 10-minute window in particular and the few minutes either side, then we will know definitively that she has not left the area because of the lack of footage or footage showing that she didn't pass by. But we are as sure as we can be that Nicola did not leave the area.
There's nowhere that there were cars parked, so she could have been in a car, for example, therefore you wouldn't have seen it on a dash cam or something
No,
like that.
no. All the exits to the area that she was, as I say, are either locked, covered by CCTV, or Garstang Lane, we're appealing for dashcam footage to cover that gap.
When you've seen the river, it doesn't look like the kind of river you could easily fall in by accident, does it?
At the point where the bench is located, there is quite a steep drop to the river, albeit not high, it is steep. And therefore, whilst I don't want to speculate as to what may have happened, it is our working hypothesis that she's entered the water accidentally, and that's why there is no further physical evidence on the field.
Can she swim?
She can swim, yes.
How deep is it in that particular stretch?
It's different depths, actually, which is why we've had some staff wading the river and some staff underwater search. But as I say, the sheer number, actually an unprecedented amount of technical equipment with the sonars, the pole cameras, the dogs, the surface searches, the underwater search, it is really so very thorough that we have discounted finding anything in that immediate area underwater.
Are there any other factors with Nicola that may have contributed to the situation? So was she ill, or was she taking any medication, or underlying conditions?
We're not considering, we've clearly considered the whole picture, but that is not relevant at this time, no, not at all.
Can you just check, so the 10-minute windows between 9:10 when she was last seen and 9:20 when the phone's not moving around the carriage?
Correct. So Nicola was last seen by a witness at 9:10 and the phone was back on the bench at 9:20 or thereabouts, yes.
Has your working hypothesis been passed on to the family and how
Yeah. All of the timeline details, what the police have been doing every day, what we're intending to do over the next few days is all relayed to the family so that they're kept updated and are aware. Yeah.
Why would you imagine that she didn't have her phone in her hand or in her pocket when she fell?
The dog was off the lead. This was normal for the dog to run about, and Nicola was on a Teams call, which again, it would be normal for her not necessarily to participate in actively and just to have the phone to listen in effectively.
But you normally have it out on
You do, but anything could have happened with the dog whereby Nicola may have gone, and I don't wish to speculate in that we don't know, but it is possible as the dog was loose and off the lead that there may have been an issue with the dog that led her to go near to the water's edge. She puts the phone down to go and deal with the dog momentarily, and Nicola may have fallen in. So that is a possibility.
The dog was dry?
The dog was dry, yes. Hello.
Sorry, that was my sort of question. The dog was off its harness?
Yes.
It was normal?
Yes.
Was there any chance the dog was itself coming in the river or near the river and she's falling trying to get... Is that what your working theory is?
We don't believe the dog was in the river because the dog, we believe, was dry, and the witnesses who were part of the timeline that I've laid out have not described the dog, for example, swimming in the river or jumping into the river. So we assume the dog didn't get into the river, but we don't know why Nicola may have entered the water if she did.
And how long will the sort of missing persons inquiry be, the scale it is in terms of search operations?
Well, clearly, a 15-kilometre stretch of river is long, and therefore, you know, our partners continue to assist us in that. So there are lots of things that we'll be doing over the weekend in terms of water, surface and riverbank searching, and our partners will be working with us into next week, but it's too early to say at this stage how long it will be. I'm going to take one more question, if I may, from someone who hasn't yet asked a question. Thank you.
How confident are you that you can find Nicola?
This is a large rural area with a long stretch of river. All I can say is that we are doing absolutely everything possible. We are working tirelessly, long hours, with a very large team of both plainclothes and specialist uniformed officers to try and do everything we can to bring Nicola home to her family. But it is a very complex and challenging situation, and we hope for a good outcome.
The possibilities, as the way you said it, seem quite limited, small.
Well, as each day goes on, we become very much more concerned for Nicola's safety, but we have the best minds and the best trained officers available to us, as well as a number of very specialist partners. So every potential possible way of improving our chances of finding Nicola are being exploited. Thank you. Okay.
OK, all right, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, Patrick Christie's here on GB News. I've just taken over from Arlene Foster. That was Superintendent Sally Riley there, giving an update on the search for missing woman Nicola Bulley. I'm just going to give you a very quick run-through, really, before we go to Theo Chicomba, who's been at that press conference for us. Essentially, it is an incredibly mysterious case, isn't it? Nicola went missing a week ago as she was walking her dog through fields there. There is an unaccounted 10-minute window. That was basically the gist of that press conference. They said that they cannot account for Nicola's movements between 9:10 a.m. and 9:20 a.m. on that day. They do believe, and they are still maintaining anyway, that their theory is that Nicola did sadly fall into the river. She'd also go on to say that there had been an unprecedented level of resources. So divers' underwater searches, people searching the top of the water as well, cameras, etc., sonar, dogs, all of that was rolled out in place, and it does remain a mystery as to where Nicola was. She was on a works call at the time. That works call ended at 9:30. She stayed on that works call. Her phone stayed on that works call anyway, although, as we understand it anyway, it was on mute and the video was not on. The dog was found right near the scene, not harnessed. They do say that that was not out of the ordinary. Essentially, just to round it all up, basically, there was nothing unusual about Nicola's movements on that day at all, and that they still believe that she did fall into the river. Of course, her family increasingly worried. Anyone with information is urged to call either 101 or 999. It is a week today since Nicola Bulley sadly went missing. We'll bring you more on that with Theo Chicomba very, very shortly. He was at that press conference. He'll do a summary of all of that and the latest. But I'm just going to kickstart the show with, frankly, what we'd planned to go with, of course, before that press conference.